The news broke like a thunderclap across the nation. President Donald Trump had signed a memorandum that would change the security of one of the most recognized political figures in America. Kamala Harris, the former vice president of the United States, would no longer have Secret Service protection after September 1st, 2025. Normally, by law, a vice president is entitled to 6 months of protection after leaving office. But when Joe Biden stepped down, he quietly approved an extension for Harris, allowing her 1 extra year of security. Many saw it as a routine decision, given her position, her history, and her visibility on the national stage. But Trump's action cut that extension short. With one stroke of his pen, the protection was gone. Reporters rushed to confirm the details, and within hours it was clear the decision was real and final. CNN reported it first, Reuters and AP confirmed it soon after, and The Guardian dug deeper into what it all meant. For Kamala Harris, the timing couldn't have been worse. She was preparing to step back into the public spotlight. Her memoir, titled 107 Days, was set to release on September 23rd, and a full book tour had already been planned. The tour meant large crowds, media coverage, and exposure in public spaces. And yet she would now face all of that without the official protection she had grown accustomed to. Reactions began to pour in. Some called it a simple return to normal law, arguing that Harris had already been given more than what was required. Others called it political revenge, pointing to the tension between Trump and Harris during the last election cycle and the role she had played during Biden's administration. California Governor Gavin Newsom did not hold back. He publicly declared the move an act of political retaliation. His voice carried anger, but also concern. Harris, after all, was from California, and her events there would now rely heavily on state-level security measures. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass also stepped forward. Her statement was even more emotional. She described the decision as abandoning safety and accused Trump of putting political grudges above national security norms. She promised to work with Governor Newsom to ensure that Kamala Harris would not walk into public spaces unprotected. Behind the headlines, ordinary citizens were left wondering what this meant. Could a former vice president really be left without federal protection while stepping back into public life? What if threats emerged during her tour? Would state police and private security be enough? For many Americans, this decision felt like more than just politics. It felt personal, it felt dangerous, and it raised a bigger question. If someone at Kamala Harris's level could lose protection so quickly, what did that say about the safety of leaders and the respect for tradition in Washington? As September 1st approached, tension began to build. Harris remained quiet in public, but her team released a short statement thanking the Secret Service for their dedication and professionalism. It was polite, respectful, and calm, but between the lines, everyone knew the change was huge. The story had only just begun. The moment Trump's decision went public, Washington, D.C. turned into a storm of reactions. Lawmakers, journalists, and ordinary citizens all tried to make sense of what had just happened. Some Republicans defended the move. They argued that the law was clear. A former vice president only gets 6 months of protection. Harris had already been given more than that. They claimed Trump was only bringing things back to normal. But the timing and the way it was done raised eyebrows everywhere. For Democrats, however, the decision felt like an attack. Many of them voiced concerns that this was not just about law, but about politics and power. This isn't about security budgets, one senator said. This is about silencing and punishing a political rival. The word spread quickly across news outlets, adding fire to the already burning debate. Kamala Harris herself stayed silent. She had not released any personal statement. Her team only repeated the same polite response, thanking the Secret Service for their service. Still, silence did not calm the storm. It only made people more curious. What was she really thinking behind closed doors? Meanwhile, her upcoming book tour started to dominate the discussion. Crowds were expected at every stop, from Los Angeles to New York. Her memoir, 107 Days, was already climbing pre-order charts. It promised to tell her version of the turbulent last year in the White House, and her personal struggles through those days. But now, another question was added. How would security be handled? Book tours meant large gatherings in bookstores, theaters, and university halls. Without Secret Service, the responsibility would fall to local police and private guards. And everyone knew that private security did not carry the same weight or authority. California Governor Gavin Newsom began speaking even louder. He assured the public that California would not let Harris stand alone. He directed state officials to coordinate with city police wherever her tour events were planned. "We will keep her safe, whether the federal government helps or not," he declared. His words were bold, but they revealed the level of worry growing around this issue. The media, of course, seized on every angle. Some outlets called it a dangerous gamble. Others labeled it political payback. Talk shows debated whether Trump was simply enforcing law or if he was setting a new precedent. If former vice presidents could lose security at the flick of a pen, what stopped future presidents from doing the same to anyone they disliked? In Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass went even further. She openly criticized the federal government, accusing Trump of endangering lives. Her speech echoed across social media, where hashtags like #ProtectKamala and #political retaliation began trending. Millions of Americans were talking, arguing, and taking sides. The issue was no longer just about Harris. It was about trust in government. It was about whether the rules of protection and safety could be bent by politics. And it was about the image of America itself. If the world saw that even a former vice president could be left exposed, what message did that send? As the days passed, pressure mounted. Harris's team worked quietly, avoiding public fights. But insiders whispered that negotiations were happening in the background, with state officials preparing for every possible scenario. The public didn't know the details, but the tension was clear. The book tour was only weeks away, and the eyes of the nation were fixed on what would happen next. The story was growing larger than anyone expected, and the shockwaves were only beginning. As September 1st drew closer, the atmosphere around Kamala Harris began to tighten. What had once been a simple book tour was now turning into a national security debate. Crowds that planned to come see her weren't just readers anymore. They were now stepping into potential hotspots of controversy. Across television networks, experts argued day and night. Former Secret Service officials warned that pulling protection so suddenly could invite risks. They explained that once a figure has lived with constant security, the threats don't simply disappear. Harris was still a household name, still a figure tied to one of the most polarizing administrations in modern history. Meanwhile, social media kept pouring fuel on the fire. Supporters of Harris demanded protection, filling timelines with hashtags and petitions. At the same time, Trump loyalists cheered the decision, claiming taxpayers should not cover extra perks for someone no longer in office. The digital battlefield grew louder every day. Inside Harris's circle, her advisors worked around the clock. They held private meetings with local police chiefs, hired private firms, and reviewed every event venue on the tour. Bookstores were evaluated for exits. Theaters were checked for crowd control. Every small detail now had to be considered carefully because the safety net of the Secret Service was gone. Still, Harris herself remained calm. At least in public, cameras often caught her smiling, waving, and keeping a composed image. But behind closed doors, those who knew her said she was frustrated. She had spent years under protection, and to have it stripped away right before stepping into the public eye again felt like both a risk and an insult. Governor Gavin Newsom escalated his stance. He appeared on national television, repeating his promise that California would not fail Harris. He criticized Trump directly. Calling his decision reckless and politically motivated, his words gained traction, especially in Harris's home state, where loyalty to her ran deep. Other Democratic leaders soon joined the chorus. Some raised the issue in Congress, demanding explanations. Others pushed for new legislation that would extend protection for high-profile leaders. They argued that the world had changed, threats were higher, and security standards needed to evolve with the times. Meanwhile, the publishing world watched with nervous anticipation. The release of 107 Days was supposed to be a moment of reflection and publicity. Now it carried the weight of a national controversy. Publishers quietly hired extra security for launch events. Bookstores debated whether to host her or not, fearing they might not be able to handle the crowds and attention. For ordinary citizens, the situation was confusing. Some saw Harris as a leader being unfairly targeted. Others saw her as a figure finally being treated like a private citizen. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. The tension around her was unlike anything seen in recent political memory. As the final days of August faded away, the pressure was visible. Every news channel had countdown clocks. Every social feed buzzed with speculation, and every city on Harris's tour map prepared itself for what might come. The stage was set. The protection would end on September 1st, and the real test was about to begin. September 1st finally arrived, the day the Secret Service officially stepped back from guarding Kamala Harris. At midnight, the federal protection quietly ended, and for the first time in years, she walked into the world without the shadow of official agents by her side. Reporters gathered outside her home, waiting to see what would happen. Early in the morning, black SUVs were no longer parked near the driveway. Instead, a smaller group of private security stood watch. Their uniforms looked professional, but they lacked the presence, the authority, and the weight that Secret Service once carried. The news cycle exploded again. Television anchors described the moment with dramatic tones. "This is unprecedented," one commentator said. "We are watching history unfold as a former vice president faces the public with no federal protection." The images of Harris leaving her residence were played again and again across every channel. Crowds began forming at the first event on her schedule, a small gathering with readers and supporters in California. Local police officers surrounded the area, private guards checked bags, and drones scanned the skies. The level of tension was so thick that even ordinary attendees felt uneasy. Some said they had never been searched so thoroughly for a book event. Yet when Harris walked onto the stage, she smiled. She waved to the crowd, spoke calmly, and acted as though nothing had changed. Her speech focused on her book, her time in office, and her vision for the future. But behind that calm smile, everyone could sense the unspoken truth. The atmosphere was different now. She was exposed in a way she hadn't been for years. Outside the venue, protesters also gathered. Some carried signs in support, demanding justice and protection for Harris. Others shouted slogans praising Trump's decision, calling Harris unworthy of special treatment. Police had to hold the lines between the two groups as the shouting grew louder. The event ended without violence, but the tension in the air lingered. Governor Gavin Newsom released another statement that afternoon. He praised local officers and criticized Trump yet again, calling the situation dangerous and irresponsible. His words were echoed by several other Democratic leaders. But inside Washington, Republican voices pushed back. They accused Democrats of exaggerating and playing politics. "She's fine," one congressman said. "Private security is more than enough." On social media, the debate reached new levels. Videos of Harris's first event without Secret Service went viral. Some clips showed her calm demeanor. Others showed the heavy police presence and the split crowds outside. Hashtags like #ProtectKamala and #She Stands Alone flooded platforms, sparking heated arguments between supporters and critics. By evening, analysts began to predict what might come next. Would her tour be smooth, or would incidents happen along the way? Could private security really manage the pressure of a national figure moving through open spaces? These questions filled talk shows, news panels, and dinner table conversations across the country. For Harris, the day had been a test. She passed it with a brave face, but everyone watching knew this was just the beginning. The first chapter of her life without federal protection had begun, and the risks were only going to grow as the tour continued. The first week without Secret Service had passed, but the story refused to die. Every news channel still carried the debate. Every headline still carried her name. Kamala Harris had become the center of a storm that blended politics, security, and public opinion into one. Her book, 107 Days, had not even been released yet, and already it was a bestseller in pre-orders. Crowds continued to fill every hall she entered. Supporters clapped and cheered, determined to show that she was not alone. But her private security and the heavy presence of local police made every event feel less like a book reading and more like a campaign rally under threat. The opposition did not back down. Trump allies continued to defend the move. They claimed it saved taxpayer dollars. They argued that Harris should live like an ordinary citizen. But the more they spoke, the more questions arose. Was this really about money, or was it about sending a message? Inside the country, the divide grew wider. For every supporter who demanded her protection be restored, there was a critic insisting she deserved nothing more. The debate spilled into families, workplaces, and schools. It became part of the larger national conversation about power, fairness, and safety. Harris herself pressed forward. At each stop on her tour, she thanked the crowds, spoke about resilience, and reminded people that public life carried risks, but also responsibilities. Her calm tone reassured many, But observers noticed the walls of security around her growing tighter. Private guards wore earpieces, officers stood at every exit, and the weight of the situation never truly left the room. Governor Newsom, still firm, continued his campaign of support. Behind the scenes, coordination between cities, counties, and state officials increased. It was as though California itself had taken on the duty that Washington had left behind. This show of loyalty boosted Harris's image, painting her as both vulnerable and strong at the same time. As September moved forward, one thing became clear. The decision Trump made would not be forgotten. Whether people saw it as a bold correction or as a dangerous act of revenge, it had already shaped the way the public viewed both him and Harris. Internationally, the story also spread. Foreign outlets covered the controversy with disbelief. In many nations, former leaders were always guarded for life. The idea of stripping protection from someone who once stood a heartbeat away from the presidency shocked foreign audiences. For them, it was not just politics. It was a symbol of instability. By the end of the month, Harris's tour was in full motion. The crowds were bigger, the cameras brighter, and the scrutiny heavier than ever before, but she kept moving, determined not to let fear or politics silence her. The road ahead was uncertain. Would the risks grow? Would new incidents emerge? No one knew for sure, but one truth had settled in the hearts of millions. Kamala Harris was walking without the shield of federal protection, and every step she took now carried the weight of history. And so, the question remained, was this the end of a chapter, or the beginning of an even larger battle? Only time would tell.